You want to take your rigging to the next level? Well, stay tuned as we take a look at some new materials and tools and techniques, as well as simplifying Warlord's rigging instructions as we finish out the third rate that we started in the last video. And let's take a look at how we can make our ships stand out. Alright, stay tuned. Hello, welcome to this video, part of a series we're doing covering the topics related to rigging ships for the Black Seas game. Now, in the first videos we covered really the basics and how any modeler can get started and do a good job with the rigging, especially if they haven't done it before. But today I'm going to give you some tips and ideas of how you can actually make your job a little bit simpler with a few additional tools and a few extra techniques that'll make your ships stand out maybe a little better. So let's start, take a look at what we need, and then we'll get into how we actually rig these ships. Now, today we're going to cover, I'll call this almost like intermediate level. So once you've understood and mastered kind of how to do the basics, this is going to be kind of next level stuff. It's not really advanced, it's not super technical. However, there are some things you could do to make your ships look even better than just with the basic rigging techniques that we talked about in the last video. So we're going to introduce a few new tools, same knots, no difference there, but how we approach the actual rigging steps and the kind of the differences between, you know, the rigging types and what you might want to do to kind of make your model stand out just a little bit. Okay, so let's crack on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're doing differently in this one. What I call next level rigging, it's kind of intermediate. You're going to introduce a little bit of scale modeling here. The first thing you're going to do is there's some additional tools. I think even if you're doing basic rigging, some of these tools might also help you. So go ahead and take a look. If you don't plan on doing some of the fancy stuff that fancier stuff we're gonna do here, at least take a look at the tools and see if those might be able to help you out. Okay. Again, we're using the same knots we've discussed before, but let's take a first look at rigging types. Okay. We talked a little bit about them last time, but when you look at a ship, matter of fact, you can see it pretty clearly on the arsenal models and the picture of the HMS Victory. You'll notice that the two stays, the one going from the main mast to the foremast, or in front, and from the foremast to the bowsprit, those look thicker. That's because they are. Okay, so the Warlord thread actually works out really well for that. But unfortunately, all the other rope is thinner than those two for all the rest of the rigging. So I decided that I was going to take a slightly different approach and only use the Warlord rigging Warlord thread for those main stays. The rest of the rigging, even the one from the mizzen mast to the main mast, I'm going to use a thinner thread. So let's talk about first the threads, and then we're going to talk about the additional tools. That way, again, all the basic rigging concepts will still work with these threads, just we're using a different material. Okay, so let's take. All right, so here's the three threads I'm using. Now, in this, we're not going to use the bottom thread, which is actually much thinner tan thread. But you notice the top two. The top one is the Warlord thread, and the one right below it is called. It's actually fly tying thread, but it's actually called. It's sized 6/0, and the key here is that it's slightly thinner, just enough to have a visual difference when you're looking at the ship. And I'll actually show you a picture I'll show you my ships real quick in a second. The top one we'll only use for the mainstays we covered in the last video. The rest of the rigging that's in the kind of the Warlord guide, essentially the backstays and the rigging, some of the other mainstays and the rigging running to the bowsprit, those we're going to use with the thinner black thread, the 6/0 black thread. Now, a little teaser for the next video is we're actually going to talk about using that bottom thinner brown or tan thread on some of the other rigging that is actually represented in Warlord's diagram. So stay tuned for that. I call that extreme rigging because it is a little bit crazy. But let's just go ahead and take a look at the tools now we're going to be using for, these tools might even help you out when you're using your basic rigging. Alright, I have a few more tools this time, but the stuff we've talked about before. We got the scissors, which are nice. These are sewing scissors. These are actually for fly tying. Since I do fly tying, I tend to like these because the tips are actually much smaller, so I can have a lot more control over where I'm putting those tips. But again, it's personal preference. Whatever tools you happen to have, no need to invest in anything special. I just happen to have it. All right, we already talked about having the needle or toothpick. Needles I prefer. This is from actually a jar, again, fly tying, for using head varnish, which is what you use to seal the thread when you're doing fly tying. We still have the clamps, but instead of using a clothespin, which is kind of bulky, I do still like this little hair clip. But I also, again, fly tying equipment, use these hackle pliers. They're small metal ones, and by pressing them, they're sprung shut, just like this one. But it's a lot stronger. Not that you need it stronger, but it just is a lot stronger. And it had a little bit more weight, so it does hold a little bit stronger. But it's very easy for me to use. Very positive grip. Here's a much larger version. It is much heavier, but again, I use what works. This sometimes is a little too big when you're working with the ships. Again, I use these to clip onto the thread, hold it in place, and even let the weight of this kind of hold it taut. So there we go with this. Now, this is an option because you can use scissors, but this is actually from a sewing kit. This is a thread cutter where the thread, you use that V, basically slide this right up against the knot, right, not into the knot, but in front of the knot, holding the tag in. You can just use that and pull away, and it slices the knot. That's actually, or the tag end. It's very precise. And in some of the cases, you find this is more useful than having a pair of really fine scissors. But again, whatever works best for you. Again, sewing kits can have that. These are called half-inch tools, and I made these. They're nothing fancy. You can actually use a pen as well, as long as it has a nice sized opening and this smooth barrel here, because you're going to stick the head over the yard arms. Sorry, not the yard. Well, yeah, sometimes the yard arms too, but over the main mast, or the top of the mast, or the end of the bowsprit, and to do some tie some half hitches, like doing your lark's head knot or your clove hitch. Some of those types of things. So it's very useful, makes it a little easier. We'll show you how to use that in a bit. And then finally, this is where I find it easiest to work with the threads, and that's using these bobbins. Now, fly tying bobbin has, it's just really a place to hold the thread. It has a little tube, and you will need it's easiest if you have a threader. This is basically a glorified sewing threader. You basically stick this through the very tip, run the thread through there, and then pull it out. It pulls the thread through. There's two types of bobbins. One has just the flared metal, which is perfectly fine, but I have some of these that have a ceramic tip, which works great with these finer threads, less likely to break them through abrasion. But anyway, it doesn't matter which one you use. You can even use, notice how thin these are? You can actually use the Warlord one on here. Okay, so this is very useful even with the Warlord thread. So just a thought. Alright, so anyway, those are the tools you can use to make your life a lot easier. Alright, so let me just kind of show you the example, the difference here using the different threads. This ship was done by a friend of mine using the Warlord thread, following exactly the methods and sequence provided in the Warlord Games rulebook to rig up the ship. Nothing special done. Okay, this is my Neptuno, my third rate, and you notice that the rigging is much thinner. Okay, except for, again, down here we've got the mainstays. But again, mine are doubled up, his are not. Again, not picking on anything. This is perfectly fine. Again, this is next level. This is taking it to a different level and making it more of a model and not just a game piece. Because this looks fine, and this is beautiful. There's no reason to do anything different than this unless you want to, which is why I did what I did. Alright, so in this case, you'll notice I'm going to turn these around a little bit. On the front, okay, on the bow, around the bowsprit, you've got normally the heavy line, but I've got thinner line here. You can actually see it pretty well right there on the back end. Okay. Then the running lines here for the jibs. Now again, I only decided to use 2 of my sails here. I didn't want to do the third one. I could have, which it would go here, but I decided against it. I wanted a different look. And there was a painting of the Neptuno in a book that I decided, hey, I want to make it look like that. So again, fewer sails, but that's my choice. So anyway, you got the nice thinner look on these lines. And if I zoom in further, you'll be able to see them better. They'll actually stand out a little bit more, but you can see they're there. They're thinner. Okay. All right. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at how you use some of these tools and do this type of rigging. Okay. So here's the next step. Now when you do these ships, the best way to do it is work from the bottom up. So it's easiest to work from using this thinner thread. First get the mizzen stay, the stay from the mizzen mast down to here with this 6/0 thread, then the heavier threads. But this one can be done later as well. It doesn't need to be done before these. That is usually the only exception. If you do anything in any other order, it can be a little more difficult in some cases to actually work the knots. So take a look at this model or this Arsenal model here of the Trinidad. Now let's take a look at, you see the different stays here. A lot of that rigging is all about dealing with the sails. Okay, very little of it is stays, and actually most of the rigging that you see on the Warlord Games example is trying to give you the impression of all the other rigging. There's all of them going from mast to mast are stays, but you'll notice there aren't that many stays on some of these ships. Now again, I've said before, there's a prototype for everything. That means there is, with rigging changing over the course of time, even on the same ship, you could find some variation, but put the amount of rigging you want on. Generally, so you'll definitely have this one. You might have one here and one here, but that's normally the extent of the stays. There may not be a stay here at all. Okay, from here going to the front, there's actually a combination of stays and running lines. And so on my Diana model, I've used it all in black thread. Okay, because this would have been a stay and this very end one would have been a stay, but these two here should have been even thinner tan. Not that I'm going to do that, but just to keep it simple, I just kept it all black and did the zigzag pattern. Very, very easy that way. Okay. Alright, so let's see. So here's how do you use some of these tools. That's really what we're going to talk about here, because the knots and the way you do the rigging is pretty much all the same. It's just how do you use the tools. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to do the work on the bowsprit, okay? Because here we're going to be able to show how you use the bobbin to kind of control the thread, and you'll also see how to do the lark's head knot using some of the tools we have, the new ones. Alright, so we're going to work, and we're going to do this just the front now. Again, it runs from just in front of the yardarm here up to the main, the foremast, right above the topsail, comes down and then goes back up. We're going to do that real quick here. So again, the best way to do is start out with the 2/2 hitches right on above the bowsprit yardarm there. So we're just going to roll out some bobbin thread. Keep it again. I can keep it taut by just using that. So here I'm going to tie it, go from underneath right there. I can actually use my, it's easier to use a tweezers here. So let me move this out so you can see. I take the tweezers and I run them, I can loop them around so that they go through. Oops. Push it through, grab it, and then, so there's the first one. Okay, and then I do have to do it again for the second half hitch. Okay, there we go. Alright, now I can actually reel in the thread a little bit. There you go, like that. Okay, and then I can come up here. And now I can do stuff like the lark's head knot. So the way to do that, the first thing is put a little bit of line out. Okay, you're going to put the top over the bobbin's thread over the top of the line going to the bowsprit, and then loop that over the yard. Oh, oops, I'm going to position this a little differently, so hopefully you'll be able to see. It is very hard to show this thread up with such a large, direction. When you try to move in tight, you'll lose a lot of the space you're trying to actually cover, and so it's hard to show. So anyway, you put the thread over the top of the thread that's going there. Put it over here, over the whole mast. So then, kind of like that. Okay, so it's up around the left-hand side, or right-hand side of the mast, facing it, comes underneath. All right, and now here, this is where you kind of reverse it. So here, I place I put the thread underneath. Again, loop it over, and then put it over here, right there, and then pull it tight, like that. Boom. Okay, now notice how loose that is. Okay, can you see that? It's loose right here. So here's where I want to tighten this up a little bit more. Simply pulling the thread. Until it's taut. Okay, now notice the more you pull on that, the more it goes slack. You have to be very careful. You'll want to hold the mast back slightly as you bring it up to the next spot. This is the part that gets kind of fiddly. Okay, so now here's where your 2F hitch tool actually, or your half hitch tool actually comes in very nice, because you can create a loop like this and then push it down on the bowsprit like that. Okay, and then you can do it again in the other direction. There, now it's on. Now we can hold the mast apart, the bowsprit, the mast apart, just a little bit, and then start pulling up to there. All right, so now you've got it. Okay, and now here's where you're definitely going to need to put some glue on the nuts to hold them in place, because you don't want them slipping and tightening up the mast and causing slack elsewhere. This also holds it in position halfway up the bowsprit like that. That's exactly where I wanted it. Let that dry, and then we'll go on to the next. Alright, so now that's done, now this goes up to this spot here. Now notice, as I apply pressure, notice how everything loosens up so much? That's why we have to be very, very careful here. So I'm going to back this up a bit, because this line is going to go up to right above the top yard arm, the top gallant yard arm. Okay, now I'm going to let out some line. Now here is where I actually want to cut this, because I don't want the weight of the bobbin causing a lot of slack in the rest. So I've got plenty of line there. I'm going to use my small hackle pliers, or I could use this little hair clip, and I'm going to use that. Just clip it there, run it up top, and then boom. Okay, now start by, I'm going to use 2F hitch tool to run it like this, and then slip it over the top. There. Okay. But I don't want to pull forward, so I actually want to bring this back, and then let the clip hang it, just hang it from the yard. There we go. Okay, and now it's hanging from the mast and applying tension. So this is straight. This is reasonably straight. That's actually probably, that's a little looser than I wanted it. That's going to happen. Okay, well, and again, I'm not perfect at this either, but this is just a way to get it. So I've got my 2 stays for the jibs to run on. And actually, now that I'm up here, it's in position, what I can do is glue right up at the top here. Now what I don't want to do is glue it on front, because the problem is the sail will get in the way. It'll actually may need to be clipped, so I'm going to want to lift this slightly. I'll place this a little bit further back on the, because I can then use it off the back. See, I can hang it like this off the back sails, or back yard arm, or mast. See how it goes over the top? Alright, so now I can take my little glue needle and put a little bit there. Right here, I want to move this up slightly, and then glue. You don't want it right at the yard arm, because again, you're getting in the way of the sail. Put it right here, gluing it in the back to the back of, and then right here in front. That way it glues it to the mast. It doesn't move. Then from that point on, now you can use your overhand knots and your square knot to tie it off. So now you've got everything you need. Now if you want, you can actually do a lark's head here, and then bring that down to the front of the bowsprit again. which I think I will do. Yeah, I will do that. So I'll just set that up here. Okay, so I just ran the last line, and now I'm ready. I can actually mount the different jib stays. The jib sails 1, 2, 3, and then still have one. I don't think I'm going to do this from the very tip to the tip. A lot of ships don't have that. I know Warlords recommends it, but I don't do that. So let's do this. I'm going to show really quick the difference between Warlord's approach and mine as far as the stays you're going to do. So you should be able to see this. I'm going to back this out a little bit more. Okay. As far as the stays, let's take a quick look and count them up. I've got from the mizzen to the mainmast. From the mainmast to the front here by the bowsprit, I've got from the foremast to the bowsprit. Then I've got from the mizzen mast. I actually have one back to the middle of the. Here, let's move it over here. there. You can see it from the mizzen to the main, and then from the main to the fore. Here I do have 4 others going up here. That's all I've got as far as the stays. That's all you really need. A lot of ships don't have a lot more than that stay-wise. Take a look at some pictures. Again, Arsenal models, and if you actually have pictures of the real ships, even the reproductions, you can see how there are fewer stays than what's recommended by Warlord. Because here's Warlord's recommendation. Okay, now these over the top, those don't really make sense. This one here doesn't make sense. This one I have seen on some ships, and you can see how it does come down to this Dolphin Striker here. That is legitimate, but very few ships I've seen have that. Again, we're looking at a long period of time from the late, just before the Revolutionary War, the American Revolutionary War, 1770 to 1830 or so. Rigging and ship design changed a lot through that time. Matter of fact, a lot of the ships that were in fighting during the late 18th century were actually built in the early 18th century. So there's a lot of variety here. So I have one stay here. I don't do this one. I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the ones they recommend. I don't do any of these. I do the back stays exactly as they recommend. Now, fortunately, the brig and the frigate, they've got little holes you can do. I'll talk in the next video about what I consider some improvements you can make, because sometimes, like in the case of the frigate, these 2 backstay sets here get in the way of the rat lines. On the brig, the front, the main mast gets in the way of the rigging, the rat line. So here, though, I do have a couple of these stays, jib stays. Honestly, forget what they're called. But anyway, so I do those. Here I do things differently. I don't actually run all of those. Let me take a look if you can see here. Yep. So running from halfway up the bowsprit down to where the sail actually just that little gathering there back. So that's really where they go. They don't actually run this way. So a little bit of an improvement in my book. This is simpler, but this is more what I'm going to call scale model. So I like this approach better. My choice, doesn't have to be yours. Okay. So I'm basically doing a lot less rigging on the ships than Warlord has you do to get all the stays done, and it looks just good. Now, one of the things though, some of these extra lines that are in Warlord's examples can be found on some ships here or there, but not necessarily all of them, and they actually represent, in some cases it looks like they represent some of the bracing, if you will. Take a look, braces, sorry, not And let's move in closer. You can see all the. See if I can adjust the lighting here a little bit to maybe help you see. Yeah, there. Now you can see all those other running lines. Okay, they're in tan actually. Okay, those are a lot of those are actually were represented by some of the rigging that Warlord shows. We're going to talk about those in the next video. So, all right, so stay tuned, or in a future video. Stay tuned. I think the next video will be some tips on building some of your models and painting them so that they're easy to do, because some of these can be a little bit challenging, and some ways to improve the models themselves to make them more easier to rig. Okay, hope you had fun watching this video. Hope you learned something, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.